All right, music fans, welcome. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for real people just like you and just like me. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest. His name is Eric Clapton. He visits us all the way from the UK, and I'm hoping that the connection holds. How are you doing, Eric?
I'm good. I'm ready. Let's get it done.
Let's get this started. So Eric Clapton, of course, has been in the news off and on lately. He's put out some really terrific music, by the way, and we can talk about that during this video. But Eric, I want to know, how are you feeling these days? How's your health? How are you holding up?
I'm feeling pretty good, thank you, Dave. I think it's been about 9 months since I got sick from the thing. And for a couple of months, it was I wasn't sure if it was going to go away or if it's going to get worse, and it meant that I had to curtail I couldn't play. I really couldn't play, and I wasn't sure. I had a lot of work to do, whether I was going to get fit for that or whether it was going to have to be cancelled. 2 years of work already cancelled, and I came to the States, and I managed to, and that was like a trial. That was in September of last year. And I was really pushing to see if I had recovered enough to be able to stand alongside the guys that I play with and hold up my end. And I had a great time. I still have some stuff going on, which is affected by the cold or the weather or stress too sometimes. Right. But on the whole, I think I'm pretty much the way I was, thank God, before I walked into that.
That's good news. Now you had a condition that you were diagnosed with prior to all of this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I when I turned 70, I got a lot of back problems, and every now and then I'd have to see a physio to just unlock my back. You know, they do a manipulation, and I was in Germany, in Munich, and it went in the bar. I was just I bent over the wrong way, and my lower back went out. And I asked one of the drivers that was driving us around at the gigs if they knew a physio, and they took me to see this very, very high profile guy, quite famous in the sports world. And he had his own method, and it involved, believe it or not, injections. Loads of injections to my lower back, which were supposed to completely take away on the pain. And really, it wasn't an issue like that. And I could walk. I couldn't. I had to cancel a week's work. And believe it or not, I did recover from that, and then went to see him again, and which is says a lot about my character. And it made it worse. And so it developed into something that it's a form of neuropathy. I call it peripheral neuropathy, where you get a damaged nerve, and people usually lose the feeling in their hands and their feet. And I had a bit of that, but and I was diagnosed with that a couple of years later, and I went on to medication, and I started doing Pilates and kind of neuropathic physio, which was just stretching really. And I was recovering. And by the time the shit hit the fan last year, I was kind of normal. I had this underlying condition, but it wasn't debilitating until I had two things, and the second one just did me in. And what it did was it sort of exaggerated all those symptoms I already had, to the point where I was really frightened. And that's when I started talking about that particular thing. And not only that, but also, you know, we had been the last 4 years before that had been a really strange period of time when England withdrew from the European Union, and a lot of strange stuff was going on. So it all seemed to be a bit of, you know, a build up, and then here we are. And you know, I think you could say I'm almost back to normal. It's freezing cold here, and that doesn't help at all with any of my symptoms.
Right. Well, there's an open, as you know, there's an open invitation to come to Florida whenever you like.
Spare bedroom.
Yes, exactly it. I mean, you could be in the studio here. I have the real comfortable pull-out couch that I'm sure wouldn't really help your back, but we could probably figure something out. You know what I've noticed, Eric, is the coverage in the media regarding your situation seems to not want to talk about certain aspects of this. Like I've done this analogy several times, and people are probably really tired of it, but I say, well, it's as if Eric Clapton went to a restaurant, right? He sat down and he ate a meal, and the meal really disagreed with him, you know, and the service was lousy, and he told his friends, hey, I wouldn't recommend going to this restaurant, right? And I don't think that's way out of bounds for what you've been through. And then a lot of people said, well, Eric needs to get on board and just do what he's supposed to do. And I'm shouting at my little screen here, and I'm saying, but Eric did do, he did do it. How did we get here? Let me ask you that. How did we get to the point where your own human experience, this is an actual experience. This isn't as if you're making things up. Why would you want to go through this? And why would you want to put your career at risk, right? How did we get here? What is going on? What's your opinion?
Well, my career had almost gone anyway. For 2 years, the point where I spoke out had been almost 18 months since I'd kind of been forcibly retired, and I joined forces with Van. I got the tip that Van was standing up to the measures, and I thought, well, why isn't anybody else doing this? And we go back, you know, I've known him since we were kids, and I contacted him. I said, well, so what do you think? What's going on? And he said, well, I'm just objecting, really. I mean, but it seems like we're not even allowed to do that, and nobody else is doing it. I said, well, are you kidding? Nobody else? And he said, nobody else. He said, well, I'm with you. You know, what can you? Have you got anything you want? Is there anything I can do to help you? Have you got any songs? And of course, it was silly, stupid question, because he writes 2 songs a day or something.
He does.
He sent me Stand and Deliver, which he had already, I didn't know he'd already recorded it. So I thought, oh man, I'm getting an unreleased Van Morrison song. I was over the moon anyway. And it was during the process of talking about that to another musician, and then getting excited, and then sharing that news. And I found that nobody wanted to hear that. And I was kind of mystified, because I seemed to be the only person that thought that was exciting or even appropriate idea with what was going on. And that challenged me even more, because if I'm a bit like him, maybe, or at least I'm cut from a cloth where if you tell me I can't do something, I really want to know why. I can't do it. And it seemed like a brick. I'd had a wall built around me, but so I thought, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. But I did make concessions. I did take out lines or change lines a little bit to pacify those that I really didn't want to hurt, people I didn't want to hurt or scare. And needless to say, my family and friends they got scared, and I think they were scared on my behalf. And
Oh,
that
oh,
also, I thought, well, why are they, what's going on here? And there seemed to be this sort of, I didn't get the memo, whatever the memo was, it hadn't reached me. Then I started to realize there was really a memo. And
mhm.
that guy, Matthias Desmond, talked about it.
Yeah,
And it's great, you know, the theory of mass hypnosis, formation, he
yeah,
calls it. And I could see it then. Once I kind of started to look for it, I saw it everywhere. And then I remembered seeing little things on YouTube, which were like subliminal advertising
yeah,
that have been going on for a long time. That thing about you will own nothing and you will be happy. And it would, what does that mean? And bit by bit, that I put a rough kind of jigsaw puzzle together, and that made me even more resolute. And so I went from that to looking at the news stuff that was coming out in England and the UK. We had BBC, and it
mhm.
used to be an impartial commentary on world affairs and state
Sure.
affairs, and suddenly it was like it was completely one-way traffic about following orders and obedience. And I thought, well, I'm not going to. I don't stop watching TV, and now I'm going to. I felt really motivated musically. I felt like I could. It instigated something which had really was laying dormant. I was just playing live gigs up until the lockdown, and without really being a socially involved in any way. But then these guys that were in power really started to piss me and everybody. But I wasn't gonna. I had a tool. I
Mhm.
have a calling, and I can make use of that. So I set about it and started writing.
Yeah. And, you know, I noticed, like you said, the music that you had been doing for the past maybe 15 or 20 years, I think that was more almost for you, I would say. I would say
Yeah,
you were doing the stuff that you wanted to do.
yeah,
Back in the 1990s, at toward the end of my radio career, music had changed quite a bit. You were still on the radio here in the States because of things like Change the World and a lot of that period of time where I would say Eric goes adult contemporary a little bit, but your songs were really well written, super well received. And when I heard this has got to stop, when I heard that song, I said Eric picks up from where he left off musically.
mm,
It's catchy, it's rebellious, but it's very catchy. It's a song that even though you're singing the words, you think to yourself, well, these words aren't fun, but the song has an element to it where you want to sing along. And then it really, you talk about subliminal, it's a great song. And if we were living back in the 90s, I don't know, maybe this wouldn't have happened the way it happened, but I know that would be all over the radio here in the States. And your new single as well would be all over radio here in the United States. But right away, you were critiqued for a couple of lines in your latest single where it uses the word, it says, "We're going to lock you down, boy," right? And everybody just reacted and they didn't really listen to the context of the song. The context, for me anyway, and I might be wrong, and that's why you're here, you could tell me. It almost sounds like we've lost our innocence, and this child, this heart of a child, is slowly being crushed. It's being destroyed, and we're all sitting by and we're just watching it happen. And I don't know if that was your intent. I know you co-wrote the song with Robin Minotti, correct?
mhm.
And I don't know if he added that or you added that. Tell us about the process there, and if I'm even remotely close to what I think it's about.
Well, if we go back to the first thing, the collaboration with Van, after a while I thought, and I knew what that would do. I mean, I knew it was released in a kind of underground fashion, and it wasn't meant to do anything but object. And then I started thinking about, well, maybe I should say something about what's offending me now is that I'm being insulted by the media. I personally can't take this anymore, where they're making, in England, they were using a lot of guilt and fear, and it was overwhelming. So I thought about Curtis Mayfield, and I've always adored Curtis Mayfield. I think he was an incredible inspiration to me. And I made an album called Pilgrim, was pretty much devoted to his memory. And the album he made before that, his last album, he made laying on his back, as far as I know, because he was paralyzed from the neck down from an accident on stage. And he was singing such beautiful stuff. There's a song called Let's Not Forget on the album. I'd ask you to check that out, because that album, and the album's called New World Order, which is pretty funny when you think about it, but it's a kind of hopeful message. But and when he was talking about, the dealer and all of his comments on his own community were pretty outstanding, I thought. And I thought, well, and that style, for the Impressions, the way they made records, I thought, I'd like to do, I sang it originally with a Curtis Mayfield voice and in falsetto, and then I started to develop it to make it. But so that's what it was for me, is what would Curtis do if he was alive, and it was a brave man. Well, they just say, this is going to stop. I've had enough. I'm not going to watch any more TV. So again, it was me talking for myself. It was taking it on from Stand and Deliver. I was talking about my actual experience from The Thing, as we call it. And then having done that, I thought, well, there's more going on, because that second verse in Heart of a Child was an actual incident that happened to a friend of mine. And his father passed away very quickly in ICU on a ventilator, because he was a bit overweight. I mean, he was at high risk, and he went very quickly, but they let his son come in and spend, which was a generous thing to do, to let him spend the last day of his life, his father's life, with him.